Hey, welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are part of the news division of United Network. And each and every week, we try to bring you the real news. So what is really going on, whether it's the stuff that you're seeing in mainstream media, the stuff that you see in alternative media, is any of that really real? Because I sometimes feel like we're living in a simulation, which we were. And it's really hard to know what information is accurate and what isn't accurate, right? And so that's what we do with United Network News is we try to bring you that information. And we do that not only on our own with our own team and staff, but you are a huge portion of that. And I'll talk about our field messengers in just a little bit. But you guys give us the local stories. You tell us what's going on in your community. And we talk about all sorts of things. We even talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating what we call the new Earth. We have a breakdown from Kimberly Gogan, and she is the head of the Global Intelligence Agency, to really let us know behind the scenes what's happening, right? Because we kind of see this stuff playing out, but a lot of times we don't know the why behind it. I'm a parent, and whenever I'm trying to talk to my kids about something and I'm trying to educate them, I always try to give them the why so they understand why we need to do something a certain way. But I feel like as humans, we are lacking the why and the real reason for all of this crazy stuff that we see happening on our planet right now. And it helps to have that because you really do need to be able to live and make good decisions that are in your best interest, in your family's best interest. And that's why knowing what's happening is so important, right? If you want more information on who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. This podcast is a week in review. So for all the stories that we put out there over the last week, I realize some of you guys may have missed some stuff, and that's cool because you have busy lives and lots of stuff going on, maybe families to take care of. And so we try to put this together for you and help you kind of navigate what happened and the stories that were covered throughout the week. This is also a great way for you to share UNN with people who have never tuned in and watched any of our stories. Obviously, podcasts are free. That's one of the nice things about them. You can just take this link wherever you found us because we're on all types of podcasting platforms. You can even find it on our app. And send that link to whoever you want and, maybe get them interested in some of the content that we are putting out there. We are, through our website, we are funded through our members. We don't rely on advertising. We are simply funded through you guys. We have a small team of people, and we try to pay as many people as we can. We also have a lot of volunteers on staff. So you guys contributing to that is very helpful and allows us to grow UNN in a more grassroots effort, really. Most of the other projects I've worked on in the past before coming to UNN are all advertiser-based, and this is a completely different setup. So we really rely on you guys for that. For all of the information we put out there, I always encourage you guys to think critically about this, to use your internal discernment, and to ask questions. If you fail to ask questions, we run the risk of ending up right where we started, which was just believing whatever these talking heads on radio, TV, internet are telling us. But when we tap into our inner guidance or discernment, whatever you want to call it, that's a frequency. And you can tell if something is true or false based on that frequency. And so I encourage all of you guys, with whatever we say, you need to know that it's true. So connect with that inner guidance, inner knowing, and it will never leave you and it will never lead you astray. And when you find that, share that with others because we're all growing and we're all learning and we're all discovering that we really didn't understand our planet. And that can be a little overwhelming, right? I'm sure you guys all experienced that in your waking up process. It was like, wait, that's not right. And that's not right. And they lied to us about this. So we do need to have patience and empathy for everyone because we're all kind of going through this at different times. Okay, no major announcements tonight other than to say I'm recording this on a Saturday night and my neighbors including my family. They're part of this group that are meeting right outside of my recording door, having a little bonfire. So you're probably going to hear my neighbors. Just going to warn you in advance. And you probably heard that dog that was barking. And this is Sunny's real life. So I'm glad you guys are here. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. So let's talk about our incredible field messengers. I am a big advocate and have been for many, many years in people getting their own voices out there. Again, not relying on what talking heads are telling us, but sharing their own personal experience and their own thoughts, right? Essentially becoming their own thought leaders. Why are we all looking towards these quote unquote gurus? Why don't we all just share information from our own perspective? That's really what got me into podcasting. And I've been doing that for many, many years before even coming to UNN. And it aligns beautifully with what we call our field messengers. So these are everyday people just like you that are experiencing life and they want to share that with the rest of the world. That could be a more newsy kind of story of something that's happening in their community. That could be a festival. That could be something really cool that's going on. It could be something involving, I don't know, there's a collision on the highway and they want to tell people about that. Or something's just a little off with their city council and they're trying to figure out whatever it is. Okay, we encourage you guys to tell us your story. And you can record that through the camera and the microphone that we all have built into our handy dandy cell phones, mobile phones. And then you can send all that information to us. And we have a beautiful team that assembles this, which is really helpful. In fact, I really needed our team. It was a couple weeks ago. I was on vacation and I came across a story. I had no equipment with me because I do have some fancy equipment, but I was on vacation. I had nothing with me but my cell phone. And I was able to send all of the components of the story to them and then they put it together. It looks great and it's coming out this week, I think, this coming week. So anyway, point being, there's no excuse. Wherever you're at, whatever stories you come across, send it to us and we will share it with the world. So let's talk about some of the field messenger reports we released this week. Elsa B. from Australia takes us to an Americana car show that's in Australia. And I found this story to be very interesting because I am an American. I have lived in America my entire life, the United States. And, you know, we have classic car shows and things like that, but I never really thought, do other countries experience what we experienced, you know, on the car side of things, like in the 30s, 40s, and 50s? Did they go through that as well? Apparently, America, the United States, is really looked at, as being this founder of a lot of really amazing cars. And this event draws enthusiasts from all over the world, this event in Australia. And I just thought it was very interesting. She said that a lot of Americans actually worked in Australia in the 1970s on cars. Not really sure how that worked out or why that was, but that led to this area that she's in being, you know, very interested in appreciating those type of cars. You know, they worked on them. It was just part of their life. And again, this brings in a lot of car enthusiasts in the area. So check out that story if you want to see some really cool cars. Me, myself, I do appreciate that. I've been to a couple of car shows, but I'm not a car person. You know, my car gets me from point A to point B, you know, as long as it runs and, you know, smells okay and there's not kids stuff all over the place. I'm usually pretty good, but I know there's people that really, really appreciate cars out there, and this would be a story to watch. Wayne out of Arizona, which is a state in the U.S., takes us to the 2025 Tucson Gem Show. And I believe Wayne took us to this show last year as well. You know, if this were close by, I would be all over an event like this. And, you know, it's about showing off the various gems and learning more about them and how they're created, how they're mined. Just beautiful pieces, right, that you can put in your home. You know, they had these like bowl things that you could make into, what's the word? Like a sink, You've seen that, like you've walked into like a really fancy bathroom and there's not like a standard sink that, I would think of. It's more like this beautiful art piece, right? It's some sort of gem. And it was just really nice to see this kind of thing. And he even showed us how you can do man-made version of a fire and ice crystal, which that does happen in nature naturally. But you can also have a man-made version of that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So Wayne, you are very lucky. I'm loving the Tucson Gem Show, and I wish it was in Southern California. All right, Kim from Iowa, another state in the U.S., shows us infrared hot yoga, which is fascinating to me. I used to do not regular yoga. I did hot yoga in the past, but not infrared hot yoga. There's a lot of benefits to that. That infrared heat technology, it can help improve flexibility, boost circulation, detoxify the body. What I was really surprised by is, I guess it doesn't say red light, but I was thinking red light. Maybe because infrared, I don't know, red's in that title. But it wasn't red at all. It had these really cool, like rectangular units, what do I want to call them, that go onto the ceiling, but they were like flat. They almost look like flat speakers, honestly. But obviously that's not what it was. And it was a very nice way, I guess heating panels is what I'll call them. But they said in the story that these were much more targeted, because when you do hot yoga, usually it's just turning up the thermostat. But that's not really the best way to do that, right? So you've got these heating panels, and it really does keep the heat right there in the room, so it makes it more efficient. And I'm not sure how it affects the bill, but there's a lot of other, incredible properties to it. So that was a very interesting story. Thank you, Kim. Rick out of Arizona, another state in the U.S., shows us how to make hemp chickpea salad, which is super healthy, loaded with protein, and it's really great. It's obviously a plant-based recipe, and it looked delicious. I have never used half the ingredients that he uses to make this recipe, so for me, it was a little overwhelming. But for other people that are used to working with chickpeas and things like that, I thought it was very interesting. And his whole point is that you can use hemp, which, we've talked before on the news and also on this podcast about all the amazing benefits of hemp. Well, you can also eat it, right? You can make a salad with it, just like Rick did. So Rick, thank you for that information. Emma out of Spain shows us how to make homemade toothpaste. And she says this can be a great way to avoid the chemicals in some of the store-bought toothpaste options. And she has a very simple recipe. It involves eggshell powder, which you literally make from eggshells. You grind it up, and that powder can help strengthen your teeth and fight cavities. This is fascinating to me. I switched, maybe 6 months ago, I switched to making my own homemade toothpaste. And I have to tell you, what I made, although it's got really good ingredients in it, doesn't look too good. We're used to toothpaste looking white and bright, and I think subconsciously think that's going to make our teeth look white and bright. And mine's gray. Mine's like clay. So I was looking at Emma's going, maybe I should try her recipe. Mine tastes okay. It's a little earthy because there's clay and some stuff in there. But anyway, great recipe, Emma. Thank you for sharing that with us. Louise from Malaysia takes us to Malaysia in durian season. So durian is often referred to as the king of fruits. It is a beloved delicacy in Malaysia. It has a very distinct aroma and a spiky exterior. So if you guys search for this online, you'll know what I'm talking about. We don't see it in stores, at least nearby where I'm at in Southern California. So it was very interesting to learn about this, but it is a big deal. Like I said, it is a season, and he took us to this kind of outdoor store area, restaurant, if you will, where people were really appreciating this. And it's not fancy. They kind of cut it open. They might have some things, you can add to it, but it's really all about the fruit. And he says this is a great way to show off wealth, including giving this as gifts for weddings. I could just imagine bringing this spiky fruit to a wedding in the U.S. and being like, here's your wedding gift. No, it's a great story. Very interesting how cultures do different things. Tanis from Canada takes us to the Soaring Eagle Support Society, and this is in Northwest Alberta, and it provides a safe space for those facing housing challenges, also trauma, and especially if they have a lack of support. And she interviews the executive director just to talk about their mission and their impact. And I believe she also spoke with someone who stays there and is part of the program. And it really is about helping people, supporting people. And I love this. They said this in the story about giving them an opportunity to change. Because in our society today, a lot of times it's easy to write off people, and judge them and be like, well, they made poor decisions in their life and they deserve whatever they got. But it really is about reaching out to one another. And I think we're going to recognize this even more and more as we move forward with the restoration of our planet. It's not about one person. It's about us all coming together to encourage change and to move forward together, at least as many of us moving forward together as possible. And as they said in the story, it really does take a village. Manette and Ann out of Oklahoma, state in the U.S., take us to, and this is related to the last story, Joe's Addiction Cafe. Again, this is in Oklahoma City, actually, and it offers support for those facing life's challenges. They say it's a great place to share struggles and joys, showcasing the power of unity. And it literally is like a little cafe. They make meals together. They eat together. It's also a full-service coffee shop. So if you can make a donation, great, but they also give out coffee for free. And it's just a nice place for people to come together. And again, this is the theme here, support one another. And our final field messenger report is from Florian, and he is out of Austria. I think this is a new field messenger. I don't believe we've had a report from him before. And he takes us to these amazing Austrian mountains in the winter. Absolutely breathtaking, captivates visitors from all around the world. I mean, just imagine the most beautiful landscape with mountains and snow on the top. I really can't give this story justice. You're just going to have to check it out for yourself. But this involves the majestic Alps. And if you're skiing on it, great. Or for me, I probably wouldn't be skiing. I would just be enjoying the view. Okay, let's talk about some of the news stories that the team and I have prepared for you guys this week. Let's start over in India because they are dealing with some crazy heat. Okay, it's very intense. And these frequent heat waves are disrupting lives. It's also damaging crops and straining the country's infrastructure. From 2022 to 2024, heat waves hit on 18% of days, which is up sharply from just 5% in the past 2 years, while extreme weather events in 2024 alone claimed more than 3,200 lives and damaged 3.2 million hectares of crops. Here's a little bit more about what this area of India is dealing with.
And while summer is around the corner, and India's weather office is already issuing heat alerts for the country. The weather office reported that the month of February in 2025 was the hottest that India has ever experienced during the month since 1901. India's overall temperature in February was over 15 degrees Celsius against a normal of 13.82 degrees Celsius. India's meteorological department says it was the warmest ever February in 124 years.
Ooh, that's a long time. Meanwhile, there are some simple solutions to all this heat, like something called cool roofs, and you can search for that online. They offer low-cost relief, especially for low-income families who lack access to air conditioning or even clean water. And then in some of the urban areas like New Delhi, the heat combines with that air pollution over there to create some pretty dangerous conditions, especially for outdoor workers and vulnerable communities. Well, the Philippines has revised its good conduct time allowance law, now allowing all convicted prisoners, including those found guilty of serious crimes, to earn reduced sentences through good behavior, studying, or mentoring. The move aims to ease severe overcrowding in jails, a big concern over there. It's a crisis worsened by the country's drug war and a sluggish judicial system. However, the law still excludes pretrial detainees, who make up about 70% of the jail population, raising concerns about fairness, especially since many have been waiting years without a trial. It's a difficult situation. Here's more on the story.
A prison that is not only drastically overcrowded, it is also overshadowed by a hopelessness that affects everyone, no matter where they stand in the hierarchy, regardless of whether they can move freely, play basketball, or do something else. It's all just a distraction from the waiting, from the constant hope and disappointment. Almost no one here has been convicted. Almost all are awaiting a verdict. Hearings do take place every month, and with them lingers the hope that one's own turn will come, one's own turn to be free. But waiting for a trial and a verdict can last years, sometimes decades, if it ever comes to trial. Those here the longest have been waiting for over 15 years. A psychological strain that not everyone can withstand.
Critics argue that the system is, ironically, more lenient toward convicted criminals than those still presumed innocent. And about 50,000 detainees are now ineligible for reduced jail time under these new rules. Have you heard? Microsoft is officially retiring Skype on May 5th, 2025, so next month, marking the end of a 20-year run for the once revolutionary app that transformed global communication with free internet-based voice and video calls. So Skype launched in 2003, then it was acquired by Microsoft in 2011. Skype peaked with 300 million monthly users in 2016, but that has since declined to just 36 million by 2023.
If you've used Skype, like me, you know that the program became almost a replacement word for the phrase video calling. So where is it now? And how did new software like Zoom, Facebook Messenger, and Google Meet steal the stage? Well, everything started when Microsoft bought the company in 2011 for $8 billion. See, Microsoft decided to use Skype's popularity to rebrand their other apps as different versions of Skype. Okay, but how did a little marketing start the downfall of such a huge program, you ask? They made a huge mistake. It's because Microsoft also decided to change the interface several times, which resulted in confusion with its users. And during all these confusing changes, other video calling programs were quietly starting to gain ground. And little by little, they stole market share. After all, why not use a new program that offers the same features for free and doesn't have confusing interfaces? Other programs like Zoom started adding such features and upping the quality of calls, putting them in direct competition with Skype. And eventually, Skype lost its grip on the video calling industry and is now only a remnant of its past legacy.
Microsoft shifted its focus to Microsoft Teams, a more versatile platform for messaging, video calls, and business collaboration, especially as remote work surged during the pandemic. While Skype will remain usable until May 5th, users are encouraged to transition to Teams, which will support Skype credentials and preserve chats and contacts. Ketamine, once used mainly as an anesthetic, is now raising red flags due to its growing recreational use, especially among teens, and its potential for serious health risks like addiction, organ damage, and overdose. Though it's being explored for therapeutic uses, the drug's popularity in club scenes and amongst youth in the U.S. and UK has led to rising concern, with some governments considering stricter classifications. Despite being illegal without a prescription, ketamine is often misused in various forms, and its unpredictable effects make it particularly dangerous.
Ketamine was thought of as a horse tranquilizer.
Veterinarian clinics were largely using ketamine as their main anesthetics.
And then we were also hearing, wait a second, this thing is also being used recreationally.
There's evidence of ketamine misuse throughout the 70s.
In the 1980s, people were breaking into veterinary clinics or medical clinics and taking vials.
I think it was by mid-late 1980s where it really came onto the club scene. So it became its own party drug in the 90s. And people started sniffing it just like they would sniff cocaine.
It's a cheap high. It doesn't cost much, lasts a few minutes, and it's easy to get into places you go.
People at nightclubs just started, handing out powder saying this is ketamine. It could enhance the lights and the music. Tons of people were using it.
Well, experts stress the importance of professional support for those struggling with ketamine addiction, as quitting can be especially difficult without getting any medical help. In today's convenience-driven food culture, processed and packaged foods often rely on additives like gums, emulsifiers, and preservatives to boost shelf life and texture. But here's the truth. These ingredients may come with hidden health risks, from digestive issues and hormone disruption to potential heart problems. Additives such as carrageenan, nitrates, and BHT have raised concerns amongst health experts. Even healthy options like plant-based milks can be loaded with preservatives and sugars. Here's what a cardiologist has to say.
Let's talk about some reasons why processed food is destroying your heart. So what happens, obviously, processed food, anything that comes in a box would be the stereotypical thing, Cheerios, Frosted Flakes. Even organic-related products can be problematic. So when you process a food, you change the structural integrity of the food. Oftentimes, vitamins and minerals are lost in that process. And then the manufacturer will add some synthetic form back to the food. And then also, as you're trying to digest and assimilate the food, we're using up a lot of vitamins and minerals in that process. The easy answer, which is just common sense, eat real whole food.
By reading labels, cooking at home, and choosing whole foods, consumers like you can take a better control of their diets and reduce their exposure to these often overlooked chemical compounds. Kanamano Market in Accra, Ghana, one of the world's largest secondhand clothing hubs, was ravaged by a deadly fire. Now, this took place on January 1st, so a couple months ago, but they're still feeling the effects. This left 2 people dead, thousands without jobs or income. Known locally as the place for, quote, dead white person's clothes, unquote, the market supported around 30,000 workers, many of which are now struggling to rebuild their stalls and their lives.
Total destruction. That is the only way to describe the tragic events that occurred on January 1st here in Accra, Ghana. I'm standing outside the burned down remains of the Kanto Manta Market, which was completely razed due to a massive fire that destroyed almost 10,000 different shops. As you can see, the rebuilding process has begun on the market, but all the people, all the shop owners whose lives were completely taken from them, they have now relocated to the train tracks just in front of the market. And so at one time when there was no one on the tracks except actual trains and everyone was filling the market, the entire tracks have now been covered by entrepreneurs, so to speak, looking to rebuild their business step by step. But there's also a massive element of danger here that the people face on the train tracks because the trains are still in service, as you can see. And so each individual seller here has to not only listen for the sound of the train whistle from miles away to alert them to its presence, they also have to wait and feel for the vibrations in the tracks. They know when it's time to gather up all their materials and get off the tracks and get to safety.
So recovery has been slow, with only partial repairs completed, and vendors face overwhelming financial strain. Repeated fires over the years, because this has happened multiple times, have made matters worse. They have poor infrastructure and a lack of safety measures. And this highlights the urgent need for stronger protections, especially in developing countries where workers operate without insurance or social support. Abandoned oil and gas wells, an often overlooked environmental threat, actually pose serious risks to public health and the planet. With an estimated 3 million in the U.S. alone and many more worldwide, these forgotten sites leak methane and toxic chemicals into the air, soil, and water, especially when left unplugged due to missing or bankrupt owners. Now, fixing them is complex, it's expensive, and it often falls on the taxpayers, though federal programs are still helping states like Pennsylvania and Texas make progress. Still, with tens of thousands more wells needing urgent attention, the problem is far from solved, and the global scale of this issue remains vastly underestimated. Let's talk about those U.S. tariffs, and we'll talk about it more in the GIA report as well. Well, U.S. tariffs, especially on steel and aluminum, are sparking global tension and economic disruption, particularly for close allies like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. While some governments are choosing not to retaliate, at least not yet, many individuals and businesses are fighting back. They are boycotting American goods, canceling U.S. trips, and rallying around local products. In Canada, these tariffs have led to job losses, protests, and economic uncertainty, prompting the government to introduce aid programs and employment support. Here's more, and I really like this story we ran because it showed you from the Canadian side how they feel about these tariffs and their neighbors to the south.
A passionate plea motivated by patriotism. Hundreds of Canadians lining Windsor's riverfront facing the Detroit skyline.
Trump is not making America great. He's making America hate. We love Americans. Dump Trump.
It's a message not just about politics, however, but about relationships. Many here say they admire their American neighbors, but they're frustrated by the man leading them.
It's not the American people that we have trouble with, it's Mr. Trump. So we just want to show the Americans that we're as patriotic as they are and we love you as much as you love us. And, let's get this nonsense over with.
With growing backlash and billions at stake, the long-term impact of these trade policies remains uncertain. Mobile data has revolutionized how we connect, but its cost varies widely across the globe due to factors like infrastructure, regulation, and market completion. While countries like Israel and India offer incredibly cheap data thanks to strong networks and healthy competition, others like Zimbabwe and South Sudan face sky-high prices due to inflation, poor infrastructure, or monopolies.
In terms of mobile data costs, we're seeing that in Africa, the average African is spending about 6% of their monthly income on mobile data compared to 2% globally. So these facts point to this, these infrastructure gaps, and that is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity as well for investors to come in and support infrastructure development in the region.
For users, choosing the right data plan means balancing lifestyle needs with affordability, especially when roaming charges while traveling, that can add up fast. Ultimately, affordable mobile data isn't just convenient, it drives economic growth, education, and global connectivity. Let's talk about highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency reports that were put out this week. Of course, this comes to us from Kimberly Gogan. She is the head of the GIA. If you haven't heard of this agency before, they were working in the shadows for many, many years. And then the agency went rogue for a bit, and that's a good thing because this was not a good agency when it first started. It was essentially the head of all other agencies, intelligence agencies out there, not just in the U.S., all over the world. But like I said, things went rogue, and now they're working for the betterment of humanity. And so Kim gives us an update on what's going on. There is a lot of things happening, as I alluded to even in our stories that we were just reporting on, that the team and I were working on for you guys. Let's start with talking about these crazy markets, stock markets, and how in the U.S. they tanked. They totally tanked. In fact, about $11 trillion were sucked out. So the question is, why is this happening? It's being blamed on tariffs. Is that really what's going on here? Because that would be a logical explanation. Whenever tariffs come out, the market usually goes down. Mainstream and alternative media are not reporting on how significant this was. This hurt a lot of people. This hurt people in my family who, despite my warnings, still rely on the stock market. This is kind of their way of supporting themselves when they retire. And they've been planning on this their whole life, and now they're seeing everything being wiped out. So what in the world happened? Of course, there's always a story behind this. Here's Kim with more.
So the markets, big tank in the markets. Been tanking for days now. And that's to be expected. You know, you're affecting global businesses, a lot of imports and exports around the world. So there's a lot of, those are corporate stocks. I know a lot of people are concerned because they have lost somewhere around a third of their pensions or IRAs or investment accounts, retirement accounts. All of this is being affected by their ridiculousness. The estimated amount being sucked out of the markets to this moment is somewhere around, behind the scenes, the exact number is somewhere around $11.376 trillion. You know, regardless of what the news reports, that's more likely the number. Turns out, we figured out exactly what that was. It looks like they were using a remnant of a program called Stingray. You may or may not have heard of a little thing called Echelon. Echelon is allegedly, according to our mainstream media, Echelon was something built by the NSA. If you haven't heard about it, there's that whole Snowden scandal, you know, where he talks about the mass surveillance and that kind of thing. But Echelon's origin goes a whole lot deeper. And I'm mentioning this because it's relative to the markets here. So Echelon was not built by humans. Echelon was built in the Omniverse. It was not built by Alpha. It was not built by Omega. It was built by Marduk and a few others. It was meant to be an omniversal surveillance system, which it was for quite a long time. It was also connected to an enormous web and nets and networks and worlds and realms of sophons or synthetic photons, which were utilized everywhere for surveillance. Now, by the time it got down to the ACIO level, or the secret space program, as you might call it, you might also call it the secret space program militaries, Umbrella, Mobius, et cetera, CyberLife, who have been very, very busy. These groups had some minimal access to Echelon, and then, of course, DARPA and others were permitted access to only portions of Echelon that were relevant, mainly relevant to Earth. Very little outside the Milky Way galaxy, but they did have some access to things in the asteroid belt, and, you know, that was their favorite place to be as far as AI connections. So when Echelon went down, not just the NSA version of Echelon, but most recently the worldwide or universal and omniversal Echelon system as part of the locating of all the sophons or synthetic photons, it put a dent into what it was they were doing. Now, let's go back to Stingray for a second. Stingray was sold to global stock markets worldwide as a quote-unquote cybersecurity technology. It was also installed into nearly every single cell phone service worldwide. Most all telecommunications had Stingray inserted into it, and it was part of a surveillance technology. I know that a few years ago there was a scandal about something called Pegasus, and Pegasus was a tiny little baby compared to Stingray. So Stingray obviously was permitted. It was not an NSA not a DARPA creation and not an SSP creation. It was a creation of the omniversal echelon system. So the surveillance utilizing siphons goes very, very deep, not only for humans and Earth, but it's everywhere. And a lot of trade interests were tied to that, hence the reason why it was buried so deep into our financial system. Well, apparently there was a remnant of Stingray, which they had at the ready, had tested it and had been at the ready for them to siphon trillions of dollars out of the market. I guess they've been doing it a little bit here and there, but mainly for the last few days, which is how we spotted them. Problem came on Saturday when they had all this lovely money that they had gotten in the last few days, and they were so excited with themselves, but they couldn't get the money back into the system. See, I know I've explained this to these people before, and all of you guys could probably recite this off the top of your head, but once you take money out of the banking system, it's what I refer to as dead money, meaning it is now stripped of its allocation numbers and quotas and the whole reason why it was there in the first place. They forgot that because they tried desperately to put that money back into the system, of course, in their own hands, every which way but loose in the last couple of days so that they could fulfill a bunch of contracts that they probably wouldn't have paid out on anyway. And no, that did not happen. Further to that, they were also trying to trip an old, I wouldn't call it a dead man switch, I'd call it almost a safety measure, whereby the global economy and the financial system was Marduk's baby. We know that. We know that in the past, the Alpha system was responsible for issuing all new money, allocation numbers, and quotas into the system to whereby it would receive a quote-unquote IOU, promise, bond, government bond, treasury note, insert security here, to ensure that the deep state would maintain the balance and be good little nannies. We call it the nanny state for a reason. So the New World Order, or the Old World Order, as you might want to call it, the Order of the Dragon, the Order of the Black Sun, then eventually on all the way down to the UN and government systems, they were all supposed to take care, at least to some degree, of the billions of people on this planet. Now, part of the reason why they were supposed to do that was so there was an equal balance between black magic and, for lack of a better term in their world, false light white magic. And in order for these siphons to function, it needed a balance of both. So everything that they've been doing here has been doing nothing but helping us to remove all of the false light or false photons and to install all of the actual photons or light of source, the golden light of source. Do they realize that? Definitely not. I don't think so. Not even close. But in the past, the Alpha would have only let things get so far. This was, for lack of a better term, AI programming of Marduk. But Marduk is not here anymore. He's not anywhere anymore. And there is, in some cases, such a thing as death, meaning death of the soul, and that is obviously a choice of source. That's not something a decision you or I could make. That's a source decision. But in this particular case, Alpha did have a default that if the financial system began to falter to the point where, number one, they were no longer being good nannies to the people. which, well, let's just say worldwide, they showed that today, didn't they? Or over the weekend, I should say. Number 2, they were keeping the balance between black and what Marduk called white magic or false light magic. That was also supposed to be the case, which is why it was so important that the ding-dongs we called Duck Dynasty did their damn job. Now, because they're not doing their damn job, and I'm going to swear, if that's a swear word, sorry about that. Because they're not doing their job, all of that dried up. I mean, the balance, we went way out of balance, even in old times. That's a problem. So them trying to trigger this, what I call a debt clock, meaning the financial system is on the brink of breaking, or at least the system that Marduk set up, then they believed that Alpha would then spit out money. Now, has this ever happened before? No. Marduk spit out money in the past, or was allowed access to do certain things in order to repair the system that he built, he created, he put the dead man switches into, and he created the debt clock. So without a Marduk, when I get those knocks on my door or the system alarm goes off, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a you issue. That's basically what I look at. I mean, I might roll over at 2 o'clock in the morning when they're messing about and look at it and go, oh, that looks like a you problem. That is not my circus and not my monkey anymore.
When things like this happen, it is tough to not get caught up in it, especially if you've based your whole retirement on something like this. And I know that there are a lot of people that are struggling because they don't understand the full picture. And even maybe some of you are still stressing, even, though you're listening to this and you're kind of understanding what's going on in the background. This is a very real thing that people are struggling with. And I do want to encourage you, because regardless of whatever is happening in the market, know that there is a plan. And I know it's easy to say, and this is not some cue, follow the plan or whatever they say, that's not what I'm talking about here. But I'm talking about the creator of the universe has a plan. And it's not for you to live in poverty because these crazy people are trying to siphon money out of your future, trying to take away your money, your hard-earned money that you've put into a system that you trusted. Because you trusted them, we all trusted them, and they had really bad intentions, and we're just now figuring all this out. So I do want to encourage you guys, because again, this is impacting people even in my own family, and I'm trying to give them the same support as well, that there is a plan. It is a divine plan, and you will be fine. And maybe it's important that these things happen because it's going to lead to greater things coming up for you and your family. And maybe you needed to get out of this way of thinking or whatever. Something needed to be a trigger, right, for you to go to that next step, whatever it is. And so I just want to encourage you with that. There really is a divine plan out there, and we are restoring our planet. We are restoring humanity. And this is a faulty system. It has failed you and me our entire lives, and we're just now discovering how faulty it really was. So hang in there. It's going to be okay. And on that note, also on Monday's report, so that clip was from Monday's, and then Kim talks a little bit about the importance of building and creating things. And I thought this was great for her to talk about, because we sometimes get so wrapped up in the news and the information that's coming out that we forget that we were created as creator beings. That's what humanity is. We create alongside our creator. That's a lot of creating, I know. Creator, creating, creative. But that's who we are. And we can't lose sight of that. And this is something that I've been thinking about this week, because I've come to the realization that I need to do more creating. Yeah, I'm involved with UNN and we put out these stories. And I guess you could say we are creating because we're putting out these news reports. But I'm recognizing that that's not enough for me, right? I've got to do other creating on the side, because that's who we are. And so I want to play this soundbite again from Monday's report. Kim's talking about how That's what her and her team are doing right now. They are creating things that are taking the place of other systems, negative systems that have been running for many, many years. And sometimes the easiest way, most efficient way to take out those programs is to replace them with something positive. So her and her team are doing a lot of creating right now. And she reminds us that we are creator beings. And if you feel like you're stuck right now and you don't know what to do, it's probably because you're not tapping into that potential, because it truly is within you. Here's Kim.
So we're creating things that are taking the place of things that are going away. And there's a reason why for the last several days we've been focused on creating. Because the more we create on our side of it, and I'll kind of explain this a little bit because this is a technique that you can use in your own life that may help you along the way as things are, have been quite topsy-turvy, so to speak. So, for example, if there is a system like Echelon, where it's universal surveillance and all of the things that Echelon used to do, is standing there, and it's kind of in our way somewhat. And we know the deep state has access to it and that kind of thing. We need to find the power source for it. I mean, that's important. And we always know that the power source for all of these things, directly or indirectly, is source. So if we find a way to redirect the plug, so to speak, to said power source and then plug it into something of ours, then eventually these things do not have power. The same thing is with the creation of siphons and these artificial constructs and space junk, which siphons do create. We focus more on the creation aspect of things. In other words, if we see a system that's not working, we use ours to create something that does work, rather than trying to fix it or tear things down. This works better for us, is what we've found, especially as the threats really aren't there as much as you would think, if you're watching mainstream media news. So in your world, the same rules apply. So you can focus on wrath, you can focus on being angry or upset or sad about things you don't have. You can also be focused on tearing the deep state down and watching the tear the deep state down videos, and you're going to get your guns out and all of these types of things. Or you can focus on building something and creating something with those around you that also want to create. I can promise you one thing. Number one, you'll feel a whole lot better and you'll feel a lot more energized, because in order to get that flow of direct golden energy, life force, so to speak, from source, you must be in a creative mode. Not necessarily do you have to be like the best artist in the world or, the best architect in the world or whatever it is that you feel called to create. But it's even the little things in life. And by creation, you can create in many different ways. You can focus your energy on even singing a song in your kitchen, when you're cooking. Even just singing, even if you're bad like me and you can't sing, don't worry about that type of thing, because you're still creating and you're still promoting that positive, creative source energy into your life and into your home and hopefully into your family, whether you're cooking or, the art that you're creating, the music you're creating, the community spirit you are creating, the creation of new programs that might feed a few hundred people, a couple of times a month. These are all creations. The tariffs, those two shall pass. It's not going to last forever. focus on the things that you can create with, and you'll be surprised what you can do. And I know we want to limit ourselves a lot. We want to say, I can't do that because I don't have $1 million. I don't have the money to buy the raw materials. I can't, I won't, and you convince yourself that you are correct. I have a lot of people that will come to us as an example and give us great ideas. And I'm like, okay, so how are we going to do this? What a great idea. How are we going to do this? And probably 20 to 30% of the people go quiet. Well, you're supposed to do it. I'm like, well, wait a minute. This is your creation. Why am I going to do it? I create a lot of things every day, many, many different things, every day. Source creates billions of things every single day, and life continues to perpetuate. He's the one that gave you the idea in the first place, guarantee you. So how are you going to do it? And it is there. The information is there of how. Sometimes people find that they'll wake up with a thought, or have a thought as they're going to bed, or wake up in the middle of the night with an amazing thought process of how they're going to complete that creation. And those are the things we have to listen to. And unfortunately, for the world, this is not just an American thing, this is a worldwide thing. We have become used to living in a nanny state. I know you're going to be like, oh God, I hate the government. That's not true. Or, oh, I don't like the New World Order. That's not true. But you have, in a lot of ways. We have become so accustomed and so used to depending on them, which was the idea, by the way. Governments worldwide were created to be the front corporations for the New World Order, and for the hidden hand, and for non-humans that can't get on TV and talk to you because you'd all go crazy. Or many people would go crazy, maybe not all of you, because you're probably used to it. You probably just laugh and say, ha, I knew it all along. But I knew half of those people weren't human. I'm sure of it. But for everyone else, they're used to getting Social Security. You have to pay it. Like, in America, you have to pay into this fund. In other countries, they call it other things. Be it NHS or National Health Services, or in other fees and other ways. You become used to paying all of this, and then this, in your mind, eventually pays out your pension, which is also, if you are a federal or state worker, comes from the government. The way they're going about things is wrong, but it gives you something to think about in a positive way, where we can create a different way to be.
Okay, so that was Monday's report. Now, on Wednesday, things got a little topsy-turvy. Kim went to record, and some things happened in the middle of her recording that paused everything, that needed her immediate attention. So she sent out this message through the Telegram group, the CARE Telegram group, on Wednesday. Actually, I think this was from Mike, our producer, and he was speaking on Kim's behalf. It says, "Hello, everyone. We were in the middle of doing the report tonight, and there was a massive breach in security. We had to stop recording. Kim is in the middle of taking care of the situation now. Everything looks like it will turn out all right. Kim will finish the report in the morning. Until then, hold the light." Okay, so that's what we got on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, there was another update, because originally she thought that she could record on Thursday. So this is a message directly from Kim. It says, "I am okay and recovering. Loads of energy healing with Source repairs the body faster than normal. A bit tired from no sleep. There are many things that AI can do, including generate non-humans to walk this earth." I know this is a little bit out there for some of you. This little caveat Sunny's including right now. I know this is a little bit out there for you guys, or some people out there, but stick with us, okay? Non-humans to walk this earth that can escape cameras and video surveillance. Last night was the second time I've had this happen, and I'm not the only person affected. Nonetheless, I've been working all day to make sure this doesn't happen again. I have more to update than the half of the GIU recording I did last night, because this happened right in the middle. So I will just do a long report tomorrow. tomorrow being Friday. Some of the information will be about the behind-the-scenes market manipulation scheme. Big events are expected by the full moon on Saturday. Thus far, we have seen nothing and believe at this moment those events to have happened last night, my time. Looking forward to a full and hopefully uninterrupted report on Friday. Woo! Okay, so that was Wednesday and Thursday. So let's talk about Friday, because she was able to do a nice long report for us yesterday, which was Friday. And what I can tell you, and she does go into a lot more detail in the actual report, but I had to pick and choose what we talk about on this podcast, or it'd be 2 hours long. So she does explain that there was some access to the Earth's grids that were breached. This is what caused that issue, and it was due to a dead man switch. This is nothing the deep state has any control over. We are talking about systems that have been in place for a very long time. So let's be careful not to give the deep state any credit for this. That's not what this is. These issues happened on a much higher level, and if you want to have more details on exactly what happened, you can check out Friday's report. I do want to talk just a little bit more about this stock market manipulation. Not going to play a soundbite, but I do want to explain what was going on with the stock markets this week. So as we talked about last week, the tariffs were announced and the stock market plummeted. This affects so many different people, not just people in the US, but so many businesses and companies. And I know a lot of people are scared and struggling with that. Not that the current administration or any political operatives, special operatives, secret space program people care about humanity and what's going on, but essentially that's what had happened. So the stock market was down. And then we had some insider trading going on. There was major stock market manipulation going on this week. And some of it was actually leaked to the public. I'm not sure if you saw, but there were some things posted online where the Democrats said, oh, we're going to look into insider trading. You know, nothing's going to happen with that. Okay, that's just them, trying to showboat a little bit and acknowledge that something happened. But I doubt anything will come from any kind of committees. But yeah, some major stock market manipulation happened. So when they couldn't steal money from the back door, which is what we talked about last week, they're trying to take it from systems from behind, and they couldn't do that, right? We talked about how money was taken out, 11 plus, $1 trillion, but they couldn't do anything with it once it was out of the system. It lost its allocation numbers. You can't do anything with money at that point. So their little plan failed. So when they couldn't do that, was their next, I don't know if they knew it at the time or they thought of this genius plan within the last week, but their next attempt was to announce a 90-day stay with the tariffs at 10% for everyone. So they're not going to raise it for, China and all the stuff that's coming out in the headlines, in the past couple weeks. They're going to do a 90-day stay so everyone is tariffed, if that's a word. Everyone has tariffs of 10%. The issue is how this was announced, because the current administration, the operatives, all of those people informed corporations and perhaps select members of Congress that this was going to happen. And those people, the people that they wanted to help, probably donors and stuff like that they wanted, to get off their backs, they had a couple days notice, okay, that this was going to happen, that they were going to announce this 90-day stay. And then they meaning whoever is running Trump's Truth Social account, that's his social media service that he launched, right? They also announced it a couple hours before it actually happened. They said they didn't say, hey, this is, going to happen, but they said now's a good time to buy. Okay. And they announced that on Truth Social. And this is a significant violation of the Stock Act. You can't do this type of insider trading. Okay. It is illegal, but we know this stuff happens all the time. It's not usually this blatant and in your face, but these people are very desperate. We've been talking for years now about how the deep state is running out of money. And when they can't do something through the back door, then they try the front door, and this is what you saw the last week. No one wanted to just donate money to Trump anymore or his people, so they just stole it, right? And like I said, this also connects in with their donors. They have made so many promises to people and they can't pay people. They can't do any of this. So this was their way to keep everything going. They're focused on such short-term bursts, like increments. Like this is only supposed to get them till this weekend. Let's fix this. Let's get everyone off our back until this weekend, because this weekend is when they thought major things were going to happen for them. And of course, they're not happening as of now. They are not happening. I'm recording this on Saturday night. I'm sure they are sorely disappointed. But when it comes to what happened with the stock market, I just want to update you guys. Again, you can listen to Kim's report on Friday for even more details. But if you just want the Cliff Notes, that's what happened. I do not, and we never really give stock advice or anything like that on UNN. So this is not stock advice or anything like that, but be very careful what you invest your money in. I would stay very clear from anything with the stock market if it were my money. Okay, I do want to play one soundbite for you guys, and that is continuing this conversation about the game that we've been talking about, I think, for the last couple weeks now, and something Kim is calling the Great Debate. And this ties to an AI system, a very old AI system, but we are just now finding out about this system that was designed to control your mind, body, and soul. Isn't that fun? It also created false light and false darkness, and it's a whole big mess that is now being dismantled. So here's Kim with more.
So the thing that triggered the events of Wednesday was something called, well, they affectionately call, I should say, something called the Great Debate. And we've talked before about the fallen ones and the war that happened in the quote-unquote heavens, so to speak. And everybody was thrown to earth, and some made the decision to go to the lower astral. Some stayed here for a time, and then others, decided to stick with source. Well, the Great Debate was a part of that mechanism. It was ultimately the war between good and evil. And there was a particular party who didn't pick either side and didn't actually even stay neutral. This particular party chose, well, let's just say humanity, and wanted to defend humanity against all of the others that wanted to take over this planet, both good and bad. And so he kind of took a stance and created this mechanism that would monitor the amount of good and evil in the universe. It was obviously created with another AI, which he put his heart and soul into, literally. And the AI was called Chasan, Chasan AI. So this was a universal mechanism that did not allow for source or dark source to interfere, neither side. And it basically was kind of a line drawn in the sand. It was like, okay, look, this is, you are going to end the war, and let's let everyone else decide which side is going to win, whether it be source or dark source. So this began the creation of what we call an artificial false light and an artificial darkness in the universe. The system spanned the entire omniverse. It created worlds of its own. It created its own synthetic photons, for lack of a better term. And all of the information and data that it pulled in from those sophons went into this giant dial of destiny, meaning is there more good not only in Earth and in the world, but also in the omniverse than there is evil going on without the influence of the outsiders. Well, once folks like Marduk, Enki Enlil, Artemis, Lucifer, Lucerne, Michael, Ramiel, Samael, Abraxas, Yaldabaoth, and all the gang players and all those that have made attempts to completely and totally conquer Earth, which they did for a time, threw their hat in the ring, they also created miniature versions of this, where they could then manipulate not only humans, but other beings in other worlds, which they conquered over the years, to input synthetic data into the system. So you could kind of say that the great debate, I hate to call it a game, but it kind of was sort of game-like, was manipulated. Now, they used a lot of sophons for that, synthetic photons for that, which would then encompass the mind, body, and soul. And it would basically block the signals coming from what you were, as a human, as an example, were really doing, versus the data it would then send out through its synthetic sophons. So the game has been rigged for quite a long time, longer than even humans have been on Earth. And let's just say it became difficult for this party, this particular being that created the original game, to get proper data in order to have ultimately at some point in time, and I use time loosely here, to where it would make a decision. Now, as part of the game, it would incite events that were supposed to be good or positive. In other words, there would be an influx of false light. There would be an influx of evil or darkness. And then, of course, the humans on this planet, as it relates to Earth, because this is our main concern, right? As it relates to Earth, these different instances or times of balance or movement from, for example, the spring solstice would be the beginning of the light time on Earth, whereas the fall, it's not solstice, I'm sorry, equinox, and the fall equinox would be a time of the beginning of dark rule on Earth, balance. But once all of the other beings that started to play games here on Earth, the great game of Earth, and in other places in the multiverse, once they started playing other games, now the game was rigged. So as it relates to Earth, there were mechanisms that were put in place for a long time that would create certain events that would happen during this time. And everybody had them. Marduk had them, Artemis had them, the Abraxas had them. It would create these fictitious type events so that we wouldn't have a light and a dark time, as an example. It would also create times when, they always say people go crazy on a full moon. Well, now you know why. Because these sophons, as much input as they were giving to the great game machine, or the great debate machine, for lack of a better term, it would also have quite a bit of influence, mind, body, and soul, over people. It's also the reason why a lot of women give birth on a full moon, as an example, and why emergency rooms are crazy. If you're in the medical industry, you probably know what I mean, during a full moon. So how is it done? Well, as part of creating false light and false darkness, in order not to have an influence of source or dark source in the great debate or great game that was being played by the fallen ones, they created a mechanism to create these particular circumstances to their liking. And so far, we've probably run across about 100 of these mechanisms that existed infinitely through the universe. So how was it done? Firstly, the Chazen AI is what created what we call a false point of creation. The false point of creation was in a holographic world, and that false point of creation had, let's call it a gematria writer. If you are old enough, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, to remember the old word processors, You remember that it had a little wheel that had all the letters and numbers, and it would go up and down and spin around as you were typing on your word processor. It's actually called a daisy wheel, for those of you not old enough to remember that. So it's something you can look up and kind of get a better visual of. Except in this particular case, it was made of a bunch of symbols, both light and dark, and sometimes they were both light and dark at the same time. These symbols are what we refer to as the light language, or the language of creation, the language of the universe. So these different symbols also in this wheel, so to speak, or a siphon, also had a lot of that language written on it in dark and light and neutral. But the more people that threw their hat in the ring saw this amazing structure that was created by the rebel, they all started writing different instruction sets, and things became really out of hand here on Earth. Not only that, they went really out of hand everywhere else too. And that's why it was almost like they say it's impossible to serve two masters. Well, it's really impossible to serve 1,000 of them, all giving you different directions all at the same time. Imagine having 1,000 direct supervisors and your job, and they're all like, one person's telling you to write the report this way, the other person's telling you to write the report that way, and before you know it, you're so confused you don't know which end is up. And this is why, whether they know it or not, the order says, out of chaos, this is their favorite saying, out of chaos comes order. You know, and in some cases, you could even say that humans would have very little ability to go against the instruction sets if there was going to be a major event. This is where things like your false truth matrix comes in. Now, the false truth matrix was an invention, and to some degree, at some points in time, the humans, meaning the deep state, did have some access to things like the false truth matrix. You know, this goes back to the great toilet paper crisis of 2020. That was an incident where they would have used the false truth matrix. Other things they feed you, like take this medicine, you know, we know that it causes 9,000 side effects, possible death and heart attacks and everything else, but you won't have this rash anymore. And you still think it's a good idea? There's where your false truth matrix comes in. So to some degree, people that played the great game, not the deep state. The deep state was just as much subject to a lot of this stuff as we were. The only difference is they used, to some degree, to a very small degree, they had the ability to proliferate some of what would come through a false truth matrix. False truth matrix can also be used to cause disease, meaning it's sending false cellular signals, also causes things like brain fog, Alzheimer's, all other types of fatigue you see when you spend a lot of time around electronics. So it can also create artificial disruptions in things that are natural, or what little bit of nature we had left on this planet. It also involves tricking you into thinking false light was light, and even your cells would think the energy that goes to your cells is called something, it's called ATP. It can make disruptions in the energy, thinking that it was getting something positive, cell food energy, if you will, and it's actually something really negative. So the CIA had some programs, deep underground military bases, SSP, definitely ran a lot of programs, especially after World War II and the Nazi experimentation era. They definitely were able to use electronics more freely to cause these problems. They found that it just made it easier because there wasn't enough frequencies they could send through TV sets and things of that nature, radios and frequency modulations and amplitude modulations through a radio, that type of thing. So this became much more effective for them, and they were used as a tool and had different instruction sets that they couldn't go beyond. But again, they were serving a whole lot of masters, and so when they kept saying, oh, there's going to be monkeypox and this pox, and Dr. Fauci, admitted he did bad things during COVID not that long ago, but hey, there's going to be a new virus that's coming out. All of these things would be created with these types of programs. So they have to tell you when it's something dark and black that they're going to do something. And this is why we actually have mainstream media and social media. So we believe all of these things, because it kind of triggers, in a way, the great debate between good and evil section, because it shows humans are looking for someone else to save them and they're not ready to save themselves. This was really important for people like Marduk, or non-people people like Marduk and others that participated in the illusion of the false war between good and evil on humans. This is the whole mechanism on why they believe that. I was so excited to finally figure that out, because it would just perplex me. I'm looking at, you look at things from a broader perspective, even from a global security perspective, and you say, I don't see a gosh darn thing on this day. Why are they all running around with crystals going, and what is this guy saying about the 2 souls per day? For 9 days, and, that brought us to the 12th, which is tomorrow. And I'm like, why? What is the point of this exercise? I don't get it. Why are they running around like this? This makes no sense. Well, at the base root of it all, it came from that AI. So without orders and instructions and information coming through, they're going a little bit crazy today. They did believe that the great game, or the great debate, or the great game of Earth, in the absence of the players, they all believe, which in part, this part, I'm going to say there's some truth to that. So a lot of the fallen ones did, let's just say, mate, to put it politely, with humans. That did happen. They did create their own bloodlines, and there were many of them. There were hundreds of thousands of them. And depending on which side they were on, determined which side the humans would be on. So technically you could say we're all descendants from the same different beings, same place, a different time, so to speak. And for them, they believe that they are descendants of the game players. Now, only the game players. That is the way they feel. Their bloodlines are formed, and then they proliferate that by, inbreeding. Too much inbreeding, if you ask me, causes some kind of mental disorder, I think. So they all feel that they are descendants of the game players. Therefore, they are inheritors of the position of the great game. So although the players were supposed to be decided, some time ago, about a little over 10 days ago, or a little less, maybe about a week ago, they believe that they are supposed to now take their positions in the great game as descendants of, say, Lucifer, which they are in some cases, or the Abraxas and others, or Samael and others, or Uriel, or whatever those Trump people think they are. And therefore, they should be able to take this position as the key management of Earth.
Wow. I usually admire people's confidence to just go out there and, just go get it, go for it, whatever it is, whatever is important to you. And man, these deep state people have a lot of confidence. I think it's actually more ego than confidence. And if it were being used for good, I'd be cheering them on. But sometimes their quote unquote confidence / ego drives me crazy. Okay, so Kim also informed us that the most recent thing is they are entering codes into various computer terminals, trying to basically take the place of these players, right? And it's interesting, these computers are prompting them to enter the living DNA from the player. I'm not exactly sure how you enter living DNA, but that sounds like it has to come from the actual person. And considering all the players in the game are no longer with us and no longer existing anywhere, that's going to be really hard for them to do. So those people that were trying to enter that information in computer, they are gone. They got a visit from the enforcer. And everyone else is just kind of sitting around and waiting for the full moon, because that's what these people do. Alignment after full moon, half moon, new moon, all of that stuff. Meanwhile, I'm like, what day is it? I don't even know. I'm not following any solstices. Sunny's in her own world, connecting with source, doing her own thing. My goodness, deep state, just give it up. All right, so that wraps up today's report. For more information, I encourage you guys to check out our website, unitednetwork.earth. It gives all the information about who we are and what we do, and you can sign up for a membership if you would like. We also post all of our content through our YouTube and Rumble channel about a week after it's released on our app. So that's another option. If you can wait a week, and you want to save some money, that is an option. Or if you want to go to our website and support us and our volunteers, that's amazing as well. When you become a member, you get on-demand access to all of our content. That includes all of our news updates, our New Earth interviews where we talk about where we're going as a planet and how bright and beautiful everything is becoming, our Global Intelligence Agency reports, and all things restoration. Thanks for being with me today, guys. I appreciate all of you. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.